Hello, Janus Jaguar here for another episode of Janus Jaguar Yammers. My apologies about my voice. I am a little sick. Pretty sure it's not COVID. It's just a regular upper respiratory jaw. I didn't get tested, but I don't have any of the symptoms of COVID. So, in fact, this bubble tea that I'm drinking is bloody delicious, as always. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about men. So, women, if you want to go, go. But if you want to stay, by all means, please. Because everybody really knows, but we just don't really talk about it enough. But men, especially young men, myself, I'm only in my mid-30s, we need to have a chat. Especially for American men. But this is a global epidemic, but I am mostly talking about American men because I'm an American man. That's just all I know. So, I bet most of you men out there, some of you women might know exactly what I'm going to talk about. You know exactly what I'm going to talk about. And no, it's not about that time in high school. No. It's going to be about that other time while you were in school that's happened a dozen of times. And as you've probably already figured it out, my last line here is yes, we are going to have a chat about vulnerability, emotional vulnerability. If I wanted to, I could spend a good probably half hour going about the statistics of men in America, of how we are declining and how much has changed over the decades and how much the stereotype of men is outdated in itself, but also the concept of the level of degrees of masculinity in men, which I personally believe I can have a nice authority on the subject, not because I am a man, but because my masculinity is not, well, I now actually consider the idea of my masculinity. Let's put it that way. Future Janus here. I just want to clarify this identification part. According to society, I am indeed a cis heterosexual white male, but I don't identify as that. I'm not trans, but I do just identify as my name. That is who I am. I am Janus Jaguar. That's not my real name, obviously, but that's who I am. That's my identity. It's just that if you go down the check boxes, society considers each individual a certain way. And in this case, society, American society especially, would consider me those criteria. Not that it really matters in my personal opinion, but, whatever. Anyway, this is one of the reasons why I think I have a rather authoritative statement on things, because while I am treated as, let's just say, a man, I don't actually really recognize masculinity and femininity as anything that actually matters in the sense of difference. Sure, it's different behaviors, but it's not like it's black and white, it's more like shades of gray. Anyway, let past Janus handle on from here. Which, by the way, speaking of which, I don't want to go on it too long, but as a parenting aspect, we actually are proving, it's not perfect, but things are a lot better than they used to be. In 1965, when my parents were roughly born, they were born slightly before that. They were born at the end of the boomer age. But, parenting in 2011, which means in 2024, this could only be more. And based on my relationship with Mrs. Jaguar, or would that be Mr. Jaguar? I can never figure that one out. Anyway. But things are getting a little bit better there. As I said, I can go on and on about the views of the way masculinity and men are, but the real thing that I'm going to focus on is 6 in 10 Americans say people in the US don't place enough value on men who are caring or open about their emotions. That means that there is an undervaluing of actual, I'm just going to say, pro-social men, like emotionally vulnerable men. Like society, or at least these people say it's not valued. You know, men being affectionate, soft-spoken, open about their emotions and caring, like these ones aren't cared enough. I mean, and even if you go down here though, like even these are not as important at the top, but still though, like look out, like it's practically half of that, you know, like but like imagine if this was all the same down the line, like obviously, you know, I even say we're personally relied on too much for physicality. Myself, I am a 5'3" man, and I still get treated as like I'm bloody 6'2". And I'm not joking. Like I get treated like I should be able to do things as if I am an average-sized man, and obviously that's wrong because I am 5'3", and no. That's not how that works. Let's get back on topic of what I'm here for, and that is vulnerability. We, in general, I think, we are lacking this, both men and women, but my apologies, men are much more in a crisis about vulnerability, and we can see this decline all over. We can see the rise of corn addictions, friendlessness, aimlessness. Vulnerability in general, I think, has become hardened for the American people in general. I mean, I don't know about the world itself, but definitely the American people, and there's several ways that this has happened. Part of it is because of our exposure to violence, but also the pandemic itself has actually, on average, decreased our personality trait of conscientiousness. That is part of the Big Five personality traits, by the way. If you didn't remember, I do actually have a degree in psychology. So, like, that's just general across the board. We as Americans have become less agreeable, actually. My apologies, not conscientiousness, agreeable. We've gone down in that personality trait, and for obvious reasons. The pandemic was quite harsh. But also, neuroticism has risen too. Especially for men, we are becoming much more neurotic, which is just another way of saying emotionally unstable. And part of that is because of vulnerability, but it's not just about vulnerability, and that is just one aspect of it. Because young men today, again, I'm in my mid-30s, I understand it. Not all of it, though. I grew up alone. I mean, I did have an older brother, he's 8 years older than me, but I grew up alone. I don't have any friends. In fact, the only people in my life outside of my parents that I occasionally talk to, I'm actually in a different time zone than where they live. My only friend is my wife and my 3 cats, but she's my only friend. And I mean, I've always been like tons of acquaintances, but no one wants to bother anymore. Like I actually frequently complain on my social media, and not that anybody even uses Facebook anymore, and that's one of the reasons why I do it on Facebook, because I'm just screaming out into the ethos, or Azar rather, or rather Ether, either. I actually haven't got a text message from anyone except my wife, and a few other people, but not actually any friends. I haven't got a text message since about 2010. And I understand part of that is on me, but also at the end of the day, everyone's phone is broke apparently. Because in 2010, what I did was I stopped initiating, and nobody decided to initiate, period. Now, with that being said, I never really had that many friends. I've always had lots of acquaintances. I've always been very social. I'm an ambivert, would be the technical term of where I'm at. But like, that's just the truth of it. nobody replies to text messages. We are connected. We have devices that we can talk to anybody in the world. We can make phone calls that cost nothing but our monthly internet fee. But we don't. We don't even knock on each other's doors. It's rude to randomly knock on your friend's door. If you had a friend, it's rude to just randomly just show up because you're in the neighborhood and knock on the door to just say hello for a few minutes. That's considered rude because you didn't text them beforehand. That's absurd. That's absurd. That's the type of society we are now. We are introverts. We are reserved. We don't want to deal with each other. And that's a problem for everybody. And it's a huge problem for men. We're going to stick with vulnerability in this episode, and we're going to start with definitions. So what does it mean to be vulnerable? It means to be susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. In a previous episode, I talked about the self, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, especially in relation to, the self and identity, because that's actually where a lot of our vulnerability comes from, is from our identity and our self, which, if you remember, if you paid attention, or just think about it, are two different concepts. Those are two different pieces of you. One is internal and the other one is expressed, at least to the public, right? I mean, that's a silly definition, right? Like, what does that even mean? Just susceptible attack. Well, it means that you release a part of you out into the world. For example, let's get personal here. Future Janus here. I did a little bit of an edit here because I got a little bit of heavy. But let's start with a little benign things, like making a comment on the internet, having an opinion and telling somebody, not necessarily even a friend, just somebody. Technically completing work at your job is being vulnerable because, remember, you are subject to criticism. And I think that is the key part of being vulnerable, is being subject to criticism, regardless of what it is. I'm a YouTuber, technically. I mean, I don't consider myself one, but I am obviously vulnerable to being criticized for my various videos, especially the quality. I make bloody low quality videos. I barely even edit these yammering videos. You'll hear more from me breathing and everything because my microphone will pick up every little breath I take, but at the same time, though, it won't pick up how loud I am. It'll pick up how loud I breathe somehow. I don't understand. But trigger warning, and if you want to skip ahead, feel free to skip ahead. I am going to get really deep and personal here. I'm going to be highly vulnerable to everybody because the main reason why I originally made this channel is that I wanted to express aspects of myself, but obviously it's for my mental health. But so let's start small. This is going to be 3 things. As a teenager with my first girlfriend, she romantically abused me. I didn't recognize it as grape until in my 20s. Approximately 7 years after the fact. This next story is a 2-parter. They're extremely close together, and this actually happened in college. And I really don't care how you interpret the story, but I think I'm right. Obviously, of course, I think I'm right. Usually, this type of story, people do think they're right, especially if they're a man, because that's how society works. When I was in college, in my religion class, I met a dude and 2 dudettes, and we kind of formed like a little social circle in the class. Like, we helped each other a little bit on our small projects, and like occasionally we would chat about our weekly homework, which was writing a paper about the chapter that we were about to explore. Again, it was a world religion class, so various religions came up. As a college student, one of my pastimes was to write poetry and certain stuff like that. And as I got into college, I actually started to draw at this point, but so I would have my drawing book and my poetry book with me. Well, one time when we would, as a group, after class, sometimes we would go to the local watering hall and, chat for, 90 minutes or 2 hours, and then we would head home for the night. So we were in our watering hall waiting for our other classmates, and I was telling her about my past, specifically about my high school sweetheart. And long story short, my high school sweetheart ended up shattering my heart, as opposed to breaking it. It actually really, not only emotionally, but personality-wise, affected me. This happened around when I was already 18, so I was able to get piercings and whatnot and tattoos. And after I got done telling how, my ex-girlfriend, actually what all she did to me and everything and all that stuff, I asked her, my classmate, if she knew my tongue was pierced. Do you, listener, did you know my tongue is pierced? My coworker actually just last week asked me how long my tongue has been pierced, because they didn't even know my tongue was pierced, and that's why I actually bring it up sometimes, is because people don't know. And so what ended up happening was I told her that, and I don't even remember what her answer was. I really don't. It was a rather neutral conversation. Maybe positive, because I was, expressing myself. I don't remember. I was really sad at the time. I didn't start feeling happiness until happiness I didn't start feeling until 2019, right before the pandemic, but I was, yeah. So, I don't know exactly when. It could have been the next day or a few days later. I texted her to chat, and she just went off on me. She called me disgusting, and I made her feel romantically uncomfortable. She accused me of flirting with her. She accused me of romantically harassing her. And I still to this very day, I'm confused. Now, I have opinions of why her in particular went down that road that I won't get into, because that's her unfortunate events in her life. But on my side, I still don't know what I did wrong to be going that far. I'm not aware of me showing any romantic interest in her, period, at all. Let alone at that time when I'm literally talking about my ex-girlfriend and my broken, shattered heart that, funnily enough, still to this day, I have repercussions of, because of the person that I am now, is due to that hurt, that pain, me studying psychology so deeply, and philosophy, and my nihilism and misanthropy, and my misanthropic attitudes all came out from that breakup. It was already, especially my anti-theistic stuff, atheism, it all just took off because I had all the time in the world to explore those ideas, not just because I was single, but because I was in so much pain that I needed a distraction. So I would just continually just read and read and read, and video games, of course. And obviously, because of this, I kind of pulled a little bit away from our group a little bit. And one of the things that I do kind of keep positive to myself with this is, when I started pulling away from the group and not hanging out when she was there, was one of the other dudette told me that she made a comment saying, "Oh, I know why Janus isn't here," but she wouldn't tell them why. I don't know how true that is, obviously, but that's what she told me. The second part of the story is about a year or so later, because we were in the same university. We ended up being in a psych class together, and unfortunately, there was only one seat left in the class. I was the last person to come to the class because I couldn't find the room. It was on the 18th floor of one of the 12 different buildings of the university, and I went to go sit in my seat, and because of the way that classroom was set up. It was just rows of tables with computer chairs with no arms. And as I was trying to go through the row, or column, the row, she launched out from the actual table to not let me sit. And maybe I did wrong here, but I tried to grab the chair and push her back in. I didn't touch her, I grabbed the chair. All the professor said was that was disturbing. Like, okay, we did talk outside of class, and yeah, and she's like, see me after class, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so I did see her at the class. I don't know if she did or not. And I told her the same story I just told you, and I'm in tears crying because not only am I scared a little bit, I'm upset because, like, I clearly feel attacked. Like, that's a physical attack. Like, professor showed me no support. Clearly she was on my abuser's side, and this professor, all she said to me was, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. And I mean, in all honesty, in this whole situation, this professor I'm more upset with than the actual person who accused me. Because not only did she not show me any support, she just lied to me. That's not how this world works. If right now I called 911 and said that, you know, there was somebody who got shot, they would send 27 different cop cars, but like, think of the concept of swatting. If somebody called 911 and do a swatting attempt, that's how this world works. The police would show up with guns drawn and everything. You know, they arrest first and then they investigate. If they would have went to the school at all, if this would have went any higher, you know, they would have used a screwdriver on me, essentially. And what could have I done? All I did was talk about my ex-girlfriend. But apparently talking about my ex-girlfriend and the consequences of that breakup, apparently that's flirting. Anyway, let's move on. Alright, so that's the end of me being vulnerable to the internet there. And so the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because of relationships. The biggest issue actually we have nowadays is relationships, both romantic and platonic. Regardless of one's sex or gender, friendships are in decline. Again, mostly women, and I'm assuming feminine gender have more friends than I'm assuming the feminine gender part, not the woman part. The women part for sure definitely have more friends than men, but I'm assuming feminine people have more friends than men too. Men and especially men and high in masculinity have less friends, secure friendships. That is, like, or if you wish to say, emotionally supportive relationships, regardless if it's romantic or platonic. Like, as I said earlier, I have many acquaintances, but none of them would ever want to hear that story I just told you. And in all honesty, I think there's only two people that excluding my wife, there was probably two people recently that I met that they're not, I wouldn't necessarily were at the friendship level yet, but they would potentially want to hear that because they actually are supportive emotionally, and part of that is I moved to a different state. Again, I am from Philadelphia. For those non-Americans who may be listening, that is a very an aggressive city. We have the tendency to be extremely critical and extremely aggressive. Even the females are extremely aggressive. compared to, let's just say, Minnesota. Um, there's a joke that I like to say at work. Well, there's a few of my coworkers I like to say, well, you're lucky my wife isn't from Philly because she would knock you out, which is a fact. Philly chicks will punch you right in the face and then laugh as they walk away. They have no problem with that. The next part of this conversation is going to be about universal human needs. And let's be honest, many of our needs as men are not exactly met. I randomly came across this list, but it's backed by science. You can probably just Google this. As you can see, the person's name right there. But essentially, as you can see, I in the previous episode I talked about the hierarchy of needs from Maslow for motivation. It's for motivation and needs, but these are specific. Like that's the pyramid of the broad categories. Well, here is the part. Remember, I was talking about the hierarchy of needs. Previously, I was talking about the hierarchy of needs. Physiological safety, belonging, esteem, self-actualization, and transcendence. But if you break those down, we can see much specifics. And let's be honest, men, you really aren't heard or seen, young men specifically. You're not really well known, understood. Obviously, trusted is a big issue nowadays. Isn't that right? Hashtag yes all men. Obviously if you go through this list, you could see that a lot of things aren't actually, if you go through this list, you can see quite a few things are lacking in quite a few men's lives. As I said earlier, young men today are aimless, romanticless. Obviously, a lot of them are not actually having relations or relationships, platonic and romantic alike. And as you can see, men in general are failing. We're lacking competence, authenticity, a sense of self. We are becoming lost. Are we sure having issue with self-acceptance? I don't like to use the term toxic masculinity. I don't like to use the term toxic masculinity. I prefer the term. I prefer the term misandry, because that's exactly what that is. Let's talk about this meme for about 30 seconds. What's wrong with this meme? Well, first and foremost, technically this is not acceptable because to appropriately enjoy that TV needs to be a little higher. Unless you're going to sit on the floor. But still, even then, it should be a little higher too, so you can have better view out straight in your neck. But more importantly, the OP actually reposted this because obviously they moved on and filled in their living space. Is it okay to live like this? Why? The question isn't it okay to live like this? Obviously, it's okay to live like this. The question we should be asking is, why would somebody live like this? Obviously, this person lived like this because they just moved into this place. But if we were to look in general, why would somebody have a rather lifeless living domicile, like not personalized? So if we go through this list, why would somebody not really dress up their place of living? Why wouldn't they personalize it? Any ideas? Come on, raise your hand. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see you. The reason is because of our lacking of community, actually. Our lacking of belonging, communication, self-expression, sharing, partnership, mutuality, inclusion, and participation, and equality. We don't really have a sense of self or authenticity. that's actually what a lacking of expression in such a living domicile, in my personal opinion, would be. It would be a lacking in a sense of self and authenticity, or if you wish, a lacking expression of your identity. Alright, and the last, so in the last section of Janus Jaguar Yammers, we are going to talk about potential solutions, and those potential solutions are pretty simple. We need to fulfill our universal human needs. Obviously, this is only a partial list, but we do need to fulfill these. We do need love, we do need intimacy, we need companionship, closeness, attention, appreciation, affection. I'm sure a lot of you men out there do not experience these. Sport, tenderness, warmth, acceptance, care, compassion. In fact, in my personal experience, my wife is the only one that has actually truly has treated me as a person, as a human, like as a stereotypical human that I see on TV, or the way that, my acquaintances and even the few friends that I had were treated. Even our family, there's a lot of love and harmony and closeness and appreciation, even, and affections. Um, this is part of our needs as a living creature. We need to fulfill this. And how do we fulfill this? We go back to the beginning of our conversation and be vulnerable with each other. Yes, being vulnerable is a risk. It has the potential to backfire, but that's the literal definition of what vulnerability is. It is allowing yourself to be able to be hurt. But that's the thing. Isn't that normal? Like, let's take it away from social vulnerability. Let's talk about work vulnerability. You have a project at work. Isn't it possible that you could fail at that project even though you know exactly what you're doing in that project? Are you not vulnerable to failure at that project? Right? It's always a risk, right? That's the way that everything is. It's always a risk. Like, even when you're eating food, you can choke. Now, obviously, there's several ways you can do this. Of course, we all need our communities, and try to avoid podcast. Try to avoid religion. Um, Buddhism is a good way to go if you're going to go with the religion, because of the philosophy aspect with it. Philosophy is a good way to work with it too. And the reason why I say step away from religion is because a lot of religions are rather hateful in nature. Even though they preach acceptance, in practice they are rather negative, and we need to shy away from the negative. We need to go into the positive. So, for example, I am a atheist with rather anti-theistic views, but I did go through Catholic schooling. Uh, Talking to the priest was a positive. Talking to my fellow parishioners was a negative. You see what I mean by that? I recommend the atheistic approach, because if you go with the religious community, there's odds that you're going to find more negative than positive. So we need to find the other solutions to fulfill our needs. Now, I think it's hobbies. Hobbies will hobbies, in my opinion, will fulfill all these needs. Now, hobbies will take you to being alone or with other people. That is your choice. It doesn't necessarily need that you have to build relationships with other humans. You just need to build a sense of self, a sense of identity and expression. You don't necessarily need another person to do that, but another person does help. Other people do help. If you share that hobby with other people, you can discuss about that hobby. For example, my CNC tutorials. That is one of my hobbies. And I have a Discord channel dedicated to that. And maybe I should open another Discord channel for us men to gather together. We can have our own community like this. Obviously, women would be accepted too, but that's not the point. The point is to build care, acceptance, compassion, consideration, empathy, kindness, mutual recognition, respect, self-expression. You know, like we need this. We could work with this, and then we can work our way up to fully express ourselves through the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maybe we can eventually reach that transcendence after we find meaning within ourselves. Personally, I think I've already been there, and I'm willing to share how to do that. As you could probably tell from my voice through all this, it's kind of getting worse. That is another thing of, I wouldn't say it's a masculinity thing for me. I personally would say it's a Philly thing, but I also would say that it is a mental illness thing. When I was a teenager, all the way until I met my wife, actually, only relatively recently have I felt happiness. Regardless of how I feel, I would still push myself. If I was depressed, I wouldn't isolate myself. I would still go out when asked. I would still play video games. Like if I was bored, I would still play. I would try. And that's the point at the end of the day here. Try. Just try. And that's all you can really do, is try. Thank you, and I look forward to more yammering.